today. Two patterns that I really like to use is jerkbait fishing and crankbait fishing. I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of them here. And I'll get into the crankbait thing first because I won't stay on it too long. Typically, anytime the water is from 42 to 45 degrees or above, I can generally catch some fish on a crankbait. And there's a few factors involved in that. Typically, I like to use them when the water is on a warming trend. If you have 4 or 5 days of warming water, that's when the fish are beginning to get active and moving up into that range, into that 10-foot or less range, where I can reach them on the types of crankbaits that I'm going to be showing you. And I love to throw a wiggle wart. That's one of my favorite crankbaits, and that's one I've got tied on right here. I'm going to show you 3 or 4 more, but this is a particular bait that I really like. There's a lot of crankbaits that will work in the spring in cold water, but this is just one that's been on the market for, I've been fishing it for 30 years. Storm came out with this bait 30 years ago, and it's been productive, extremely productive on the Missouri, Ozarks, Highland lakes like Tabor Rock, Bull Shoals, Lake of the Ozarks, Truman, Stockton. I mean, those lakes, and it'll work anywhere that you have rocky banks and drops and crawdads in the water. Any place that there's crawfish, they'll bite these wiggle warts in the spring. I'll show you the kind of rig I like to fish it on. This is just my personal preference. I told the guys earlier, and I tell all the crowds I speak to the same thing. Excuse me, just because I like to fish with this particular type of rod and reel doesn't mean it would be the most comfortable for you. You need to pick a rod and a reel that is comfortable for you to fish with. You just need to find a few things in a rod and reel that are, like for crankbait fishing, you need a rod that has a fairly soft tip to give that fish time. For one thing, you want to be able to cast it. That soft tip will help you cast it. And then when you're reeling it in and a bass grabs that crankbait, you want there to be some give in there. You don't want to jerk it away from him. The stronger, more powerful graphite rods have too fast a reacting tip. This rod is a graphite glass composite. It's a slow reacting rod, and it gives that fish time to get that bait. So I like a rod that's got I took myself already. I like a rod that's got a fairly, what we call a parabolic action. It bends quite a ways down into the rod blank. Get this thing off here where I can show you. But you can see that that thing bends quite a ways down, and then the last third of your rod is real stout backbone. That's for when you get it in the mouth of him and you get the hook set in. You want something to pull the hooks into him good. This is a little 7-foot Bass Pro Shop cranking rod. They're relatively inexpensive, but they're just an excellent crankbait rod. This is a number 2 power, which is called a medium 702, and I have a real good success with that with this type crankbait. I'm using a standard gear ratio reel. It's 5 to 2 to 1. It takes up about 23 inches per turn. I like a fairly slow reel in the cold water. I don't want a real fast retrieve reel because I'm afraid I'll be moving that bait away from those fish too fast. The reel helps me slow down a little bit and give them that slower presentation. And in that cold water, sometimes you want that bait just barely down there, just ticking those rocks coming slow. So I like a fairly slow retrieve reel to fish a crankbait with. The last few years, I've been using fluorocarbon line to throw my crankbaits with, almost all of them. I just like it for 2 or 3 different reasons. It's smaller diameter. You can get more depth out of it if you want depth, and a lot of times you'll want to get a little more depth with that bait, so the smaller fluorocarbon gets you down a little deeper. And also that fluorocarbon line has a tendency to sink where a monofilament line will stay up. So the fluorocarbon is a good line for reaching depth. It also has 2 or 3 other features that make it good. Excuse me. It's real strong, but it's a very sensitive line, and it doesn't have a lot of stretch like monofilament. So it gives you the ability to feel the bottom and feel whatever structure you're coming in contact with, and then it also gives you the ability to feel that strike better and get a better hook set. That low stretch in that fluorocarbon lets you get a better hook set. So I've been using fluorocarbon on crankbaits for the last 3 or 4 years, and I think it's really increased my percentage of hookups. I use, literally thousands of bass on that bait ever since they first came out, and it's just a real effective fish catcher. There's quite a few other crankbaits on the market that will work real good in the cold water in the spring, like the Bombers makes a 6 and 7A. That's 2 good choices. The Norman Deep Little Inn is an excellent choice, and there's some other ones too, but my favorite on rocky lakes in this central part of the country has got to be this wigglewort. And as far as colors go on these warts, this one is called a natural craw, a natural green craw. It's a good one. I really like it. I tend to stick with the crawfish colors on that bait most of the time. I like the greens and browns. I'll show you 2 or 3 of them here that I like. This one right here is the old original reddish brown wigglewort, one of the first colors that they ever come out with, and I probably caught more bass on that color than all the rest of them put together. And that is still a fantastic color, but another one of that brown one, and this natural craw right here is probably my 2 favorite colors of wiggleworts right there. That's just, and especially on the clear water lakes, I just like the browns and greens. But now if I get into a situation where the water's off colored, I go to what they call a fire tiger. It's just a chartreuse bait with some black spots on it and orange on the belly. That's what we call a fire tiger crankbait. And that'll be my 3 main color selections of my wiggleworts. I've got a little box like this at home that I've got about, I don't know, there's probably 7 or 8 in each one of those slots, wiggleworts. And I carry that. That's just my springtime wigglewort crankbait box, and it's mostly browns and greens, or the chartreuse, and I've got a few shad colored ones in there that I will occasionally take out and try once in a while, but I don't ever catch anything on them. I just use the greens, browns, and the fire tiger. That's the 3 main ones that I use that I catch them on. And you just can't go wrong with a crankbait from now until the spawn. It's a good pattern from the time they start biting or start getting active after the ice goes out, or when you first can get on the water in the spring, and up until the spawn. And crankbaiting is a good pattern. They'll just get better every day as the temperature warms and the wind starts blowing. That wind, I love to fish windy banks where that wind's blowing the shad in, stirring up the water, and those bass start coming up, and they're aggressively feeding on crawfish and shad, anything along there in that turbulent water. And that's when I really whack them on that wigglewort. And I've just had some awesome days throughout my life on that bait, and still catch them every spring on it. I catch them every spring on it. So it's a good bait to put in your arsenal of tackle, and I know that if you try it, you'll catch some bass on it.